Hello, and welcome to the 2015 course on Technology, Innovation, and the U.S. Civil War. I'm Dr. Nick Sambaluk, Purdue's Professor of Military Science and Technology and liaison with the Army's Cyber Institute located at West Point. Our course explores some of the physical tools, ideas, methods, strategies, and organizational changes undertaken by people in the Union and the Confederacy during the U.S. Civil War. Our objective is twofold: to understand the course of the war itself, and then to apply our contextual awareness to build an understanding of how innovation impacted the war. Today, we will introduce our overview of the century as a whole, describe a bit about the first half of the war, and close with questions for you to think about and discuss using the online class discussion forum. First, it's valuable to consider how dynamic and consequential the 19th century really was. At the start of the 1800s, it was as expensive to move a barrel of flour across all 3,000 miles of the Atlantic Ocean by boat as it was to bring the same container 30 miles overland by a wagon pulled by an ox or a horse. Transport by sea was the most efficient and effective means of transportation, and the pace of movement at sea was accelerating. In 1807, Robert Fulton pioneered the steamboat, where burnt fuel transformed water into compressed steam to propel a ship. The first steamboat line ran from New York City up the Hudson River to Albany, passing West Point, New York. Steamboat technology was in the process of maturing when the Civil War occurred. An early oil combustion system predated the Civil War, but was not relevant to the conflict. By the end of the 19th century, these and other combustion systems gave the fastest ships in the world speeds better than 30 knots. On land, the steam engine fired imaginations and led to railroad building frenzies, first in Britain and then in America, and subsequently across France, Germany, Russia, and elsewhere. When the Civil War erupted, even with the loss of Southern mileage, the Union States had more railroad mileage, at about 21,000 miles, than any other country on Earth. Britain ranked second, and the Confederacy ranked third, with 8,900. The telegraph facilitated faster messaging. We'll examine both technologies in more detail during the coming weeks. We'll also, beginning in 2 weeks, start to learn more about the weapons of war. At the outset of the 19th century, an infantry weapon was a smooth-bore, flint-ignited musket, firing a 1-ounce lead ball to an effective range of about a maximum of 100 yards. A trained infantryman might fire 3 times in a minute, his view progressively obscured by powder and smoke, and his gun increasingly clogged with residue. By the end of the 19th century, infantrymen in Europe carried bolt-action rifled weapons with ammunition magazines incorporated into the gun for repeated firing. Accurate to perhaps a mile or more, an infantryman's view was less encumbered thanks to smokeless gunpowder. The best infantryman might fire 15 or even 20 times in a single minute. The 19th century saw considerable change in ideas about the nature and the role of society and government, and about the relation between human beings. The mammoth scale of the Western frontier and the crisis of the Civil War drove many people, generally and with some reluctance, to configure government to take on new responsibilities, overseeing the development of railways, collecting revenues in sums literally beyond earlier comprehension, building massive armies, protecting and educating newly freed people. Consider the chapter written by Pulitzer winner Mark Neely. The Civil War erupted in 1861 because many people across the South feared that the new Republican Party aimed to eradicate slavery. a practice at the foundation of the social and economic organization of more than half of the nation up to that time. In the 19th century, as today, Americans believed in the vitality of the United States for being a land of opportunity. Then, as today, Americans had different ideas about what opportunity meant. Many people believed that the chance to get ahead in life required a limitation on the expansion of slavery. Not because they saw slavery as morally evil in the 21st century sense that we now do, but instead because a slave-owning plantation owner could outcompete non-slaveholders and thereby ruin their livelihood. Most 19th century Americans who opposed the expansion of slavery were driven by these economically defined principles. For many who did own slaves, or who hoped to own slaves someday, any limitation on the further expansion of slavery deeper west was a threat on how they understood opportunity. Now, obviously, enslaved people defined freedom as a key to opportunity, although their vote did not yet yield anything in political terms. Only a tiny fraction of Americans, the so-called abolitionists, objected to slavery on moral grounds. Remember that when you encounter descriptions of the, quote, radical Republicans of the Civil War era, this is the radical fringe of that day that believed in the evil of slavery being evil. And even amongst abolitionists, many people felt that there were racial differences and that the races were unequal, while still they nonetheless asserted that slavery was an immoral practice. The Confederacy was dedicated to the concept of states' rights and to the institution of slavery. The relationship between these two concepts has often been misinterpreted in the last 150 years. In fact, during the course of the war, the Confederacy's government tried to mortgage portions of state autonomy for the sake of winning the war. Almost never did the Confederacy ever consider mortgaging slavery for the sake of Southern independence. Furthermore, although the theory of state autonomy has a legal pedigree dating to the Jeffersonian objections to the Federalist policies of 1798, these objections did not erupt into civil war until the issue of slavery was involved. In short, although states' rights is the framework within which secession occurred, slavery stood at the very center of the conflict. 46,200 planters being people who owned 20 or more human beings, existed in the South. And at first, Unionists suspected that secession was a conspiracy underwritten by this tiny minority in a country of 32 million. Joseph Glather does a superb job of describing the war in the Eastern Theater between 1861 and 1863. I want to close by introducing questions about the material for you to discuss and consider online. This will prepare us and propel us toward the next unit. First, think about the Union Anaconda Plan and the Confederate cordon defense strategy. A strategy is a high-level plan made by commanders aiming to achieve a political goal by using the national resources that are available. Why does the Union pursue the Anaconda Plan? Why does the Confederacy use a cordon strategy? What is it that they are assuming about the war, about their own strategic position, and about the position of their enemy? Second, considering the military campaigns of the East, which side is more successful overall in matching its strategy with its policy objectives? You can think of policy as the political goals that a country has when it goes into war. Last, evaluate Robert E. Lee's generalship so far in the war. Do his operational and tactical actions support Confederate strategy and policy. Now remember, policy is the goals that a country goes to war to achieve. Strategy is the plan that a country makes in order to accomplish these goals by using the resources that it has. Operations are the movement of armies to and between battles to promote strategy. Tactics refers to the movement, the placement, and the use of military forces on the battlefield to achieve victory in a battle, supporting an operation. I look forward to your thoughts, questions, comments, and insights. Next time, we'll complete our overview of the Civil War before delving into topical studies of various innovation areas. I look forward to seeing you next time.